we worthily mention our sins and acknowledging our wretchedness. We obtain of you, the God of all mercy, perfect remission of forgiveness. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. O God, you are the Lord of heaven and earth, yet through your Son you reveal that you are humble. It is your delight to serve. We pray that we too might have that same spirit of humility and a deep desire to serve. May we be mindful of those who are struggling, those who are suffering, and those who are especially vulnerable during this current pandemic. We have a special love for them. May we have the same love. We thank you for being the humble, loving God you are. May we become more like you, loving, humble, serving. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ, who came not to be ministered to, but to minister. Amen. To the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is now in session. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021 to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
Question that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency, the Governor.
A letter from the Very Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Gibson, Acting Governor General, Vacation leave of the Governor General, Her Excellency, Dame Sandra Mason, GC, MG, DA, QC. 19 February 2021. Dear Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to inform the Honorable the House of Assembly that the Governor General, Her Excellency, Dame Sandra Mason, GC, MG, DA, QC, has been granted vacation leave for the period of 6th to the 22nd of February 2021. In accordance with the provisions of Section 29, Subsection 1, Subsection A of the Constitution, I have taken the necessary oaths to perform the function of the Office of Governor General during Her Excellency's absence. As the Honorable the House of Assembly is not meeting at this time, it will not be possible for the usual formal message to be sent to your chamber. Will you, therefore, please bring the absence of Her Excellency formally to the attention of the Honorable the House of Assembly when next it meets. I have the honor to be yours faithfully, Acting Governor General.
Petitions, papers.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the Post Office Delivery Amendment Regulations 2021 and the Post Office Miscellaneous Services Amendment Regulations 2021.
Government notices.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, on the last occasion, notice of the National Payment Systems Bill 2021 was given on the 2nd of February. Since that date, we have sought to substitute a further bill, and that bill was circulated on the 20th of February 2021. I would therefore ask that the new bill be circulated and taken as the current bill for consideration today.
Could you repeat the last sentence, ma'am?
Mr. Speaker, I would beg to move that the new bill be substituted for the first bill.
The question is that the new bill be substituted. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The new bill is thereby substituted.
Private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the National Payment System Bill 2021.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read here first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business?
Government business is now the order of the day.
Order number 5, sir. Order number 5, sir. In the name of the Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the second reading of the National Payment System Bill 2021.
Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin this debate, I wish to beg the Honorable Chamber's indulgence to include order number 4 as part of this debate such that we can have a cognitive debate as both bills are related in nature.
The question is that order 4 and 5 be debated as a cognate debate because they are inextricably linked. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned orders 4 and 5 can be debated as a cognate debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This process that we are undertaking today is particularly relevant, sir, because in part, upon assuming office in May of 2018, we set about the implementation of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, sir. And whilst the early stage of that was to provide a measure of stability, sir, with respect to the fundamentals of the economy, the transformation processes, sir, that are required to move Barbados beyond what we have been accustomed, required that we look at all of our systems, not just in government, sir, but equally across the private sector. And after we got over the initial part of the debt restructuring that dealt with domestic debt, sir, I set about in January of 2019, sir,
the series,
where I...
right? Outer, that is the...
where I would have, I pulled together, sir, all of the financial institutions in Barbados, stakeholders within the business community, sir, the central bank, the treasury, and other players and stakeholders within the payments ecosystem in Barbados, to first understand, sir, why it is that Barbados was, at that stage, not capable of being able to execute, sir, a number of basic things that the average individual in Barbados, sir, expects of their systems, and therefore we set about a process, sir, to be able to streamline all of the processes and procedures within the financial institutions, but equally, sir, to have representatives of all business classes, sir, along the way, to be able to ensure that we are capable, sir, of moving Barbados economy forward. And so we started looking clearly at what each financial institution or player was offering at that time, sir. And we set about a path which has culminated now in a situation 2 years later, where all of the major financial institutions, including banks and credit unions, sir, are now on a path to be able to upgrade their systems, but be able to move to a situation where payments can happen in real time, sir, starting during 2021. But the testing of those systems, sir, and the upgrades of those systems are ongoing, and I will come back to that later. But we started on this journey, sir, as I said, in January 2019, because we knew as a government that it was important that we tackle a number of the long-standing issues as it relates to doing business in the country. And whilst it is, the government has taken the responsibility, sir, for examining how we ourselves do business internally in the government, as well as with the public, sir. We have started on the process of onboarding a number of different processes being offered across government to the citizens, but at the same time, at the back end, sir, being able to utilize technology in order to help government deliver better services to the people. And we recognize, sir, that by so doing, that we started to trigger reactions, sir, within the context of not just the financial system, but certainly within the context of the business community. And government will continue, sir, to lead in this effort, because for too long, sir, things have been left wanting, a lack of attention, and it is important now that we create the atmosphere, sir, in this country. And I think it is especially important, sir, is in the middle of a pandemic, where we have heard the pleas and cries of a large number of businesses, sir, that have had to be closed physically because of the nature of what they do, but in part because of the lack of investment in technology, as well as reviewing their own processes, sir, has meant that the disruption of the pandemic is actually a little more acute than it otherwise would be had we had a timeline that was a little more aggressive with respect to being able to digitize our payment systems. And the reality is, sir, that with the best will in the world, our payment service providers were all at different stages along the path, because there was no singular purpose, if you like, sir, with respect to clarity of direction. And therefore, this journey now over the last 2 years has meant that all of our major financial institutions now, sir, are on a path to be able to support a national payment system, a national payments ecosystem that will provide, in time, greater choice to the business community by way of merchant services and the like. Now, why is this important, sir, to the average Barbadian? The average Barbadian, sir, would go on Amazon, sir, eBay, Alibaba, sir, browse, choose whatever item they want, sir, even the color, pay with their card, sir, and they arrive in Barbados with relative ease. Now, the truth is, sir, there's a whole lot that takes place in the background to facilitate it. So once the customer gets a call from whoever their freight forwarder happens to be at the airport or otherwise, and they see this relative ease of the execution of the transaction, there's a whole lot of logistics behind there that the average citizen does not see. But equally in Barbados, sir, when we walk into any store or any business in Barbados and we use any of our cards, whether debit or credit cards, sir, that too triggers a whole lot of back office activity which is unseen to the public. But the reality is, sir, that in the 21st century, our citizens have been long in complaining about the ability to be able to perform similar transactions in Barbados. And the government has been working on its own steam, working with the stakeholders and pushing to be able to upgrade our own systems, to be able not just to receive payments from citizens, but to on the other hand, deliver payments to citizens as required. And in that vein, sir, it is important that we understand that yes, culture has a role to play in the uptake of a lot of technologies. And nothing that we are doing here, sir, is effectively new. A lot of the technologies exist globally, and that is what allows any of us, sir, any of our constituents, any citizen in Barbados, to log on to any of the websites that I mentioned earlier, sir, and be able to effect a payment because the systems in those jurisdictions are geared for any business, however small or large, to be able to supply those goods and our services to any person globally, and that is important to understand, globally, because when you buy something on Amazon, sir, that is a cross-border transaction. That's the fancy term that is used in our neck of the woods. But anytime you buy something from Amazon, sir, it is a cross-border transaction. It means that foreign exchange has to, because no seller on Amazon, sir, is concerned with how much Barbados dollars you may have in your account. What they're concerned is that they will receive, if it's Amazon in the United States, they want US dollars. If it's Amazon in the UK, sir, they want pounds. If it's Amazon in Canada, they want Canadian dollars. And therefore, the back end of that, sir, the process where our central bank then engages obviously with their central banks and the intermediaries to be able to exchange is absolutely important, such that when our citizens make any purchase, that they will receive the goods and our services that they have paid for, because in the background, the IT systems are talking with one another to be able to facilitate that. And therefore, what this bill is contemplating, sir, is to change the landscape with respect to the way that business is conducted in the country. The reality is, sir, we are laying a platform, much like a track, sir, an athletics track. And persons will have the options to determine, sir, how they want to run their race, run their business, so to speak, in terms of the product offerings. And to the extent that we want to encourage more businesses in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, to do more foreign trade, to go and take advantage of any opportunity, any part of the world, sir, it means that we must have the systems in place which would allow anybody, any part of the world, to log on to any Belgian website if they want, or Amazon or whoever person may choose to put their shop window, so to speak, and allow any citizen, any part of the world, to buy something from anybody in Barbados with ease. And therefore, what is being contemplated, sir, with respect to this national payment system is much broader than what is currently existing in Barbados for the average business. But, sir, it is within certainly the right of any business or vendor to determine what business model they may wish to pursue. The reality is, sir, that we feel that in order to do business, we need to have in a cost-effective way, we need to have as many transactions, sir, being run through our payment systems, such that the ability for businesses not just to expand in Barbados, but to expand in the region and to expand globally, that this will provide a facility, an option that would allow businesses to do a lot more cross-border transactions and widen, sir, the scope with respect to their operations. The reality is, sir, that there are a number of critical players within that. Because at the end of the day, sir, and you've heard me say this so many times in the past, so you might get a little tired of me saying it. I cannot wait, sir, to the day that I can go on a Sunday morning and pay the coconut vendor that I get my water from, sir, with my mobile phone, and that he's satisfied that whether I swipe or scan whatever QR code or whatever mechanism it is that's in place, that he is comfortable, sir, with respect to the transaction, and that he does not have to be looking over his shoulder with respect to any matters of security. Of course, as you know, sir, a coconut vendor usually has an implement that may very well serve as a deterrent. But the reality, sir, is that we want business to be able to be conducted in a manner that provides security in a true sense, sir, for everyone who's involved in it, whether you're a coconut vendor, whether you're a large supermarket, sir, whether you're any other corporate entity in Barbados or anything in between. And therefore, in the middle of a pandemic, sir, and let me say that since COVID hit Barbados, sir, and I know that, and I should also indicate, sir, that at that initial set of meetings that we had in January 2019, sir, the National Insurance Scheme was also a part of that process, because as you're aware, sir, the National Insurance provides pensions for those who have built this country. And we have been working on a program, sir, to try to onboard as many of the pensioners in the country to be able to have their pensions, but also the other short-term benefits that are paid by the NAS, sir, to be able to receive those by direct debit into their bank accounts. And we've been pushing that program, sir, and when COVID hit, when we started that process, there was somewhere north of 11,000 persons that were receiving checks from the NAS on a monthly basis. And as you know, sir, many of our shops and mini marts across Barbados facilitate the cashing of those checks for pensioners. So in a real sense, they perform some of these payment services in a kind of informal way for pensioners. The reality is that there have been some concerns raised about some of the fees, if you like, that are charged in this area. But we want to streamline all of this, sir, and to give everybody in the market certainty with respect to what happens. But the reality is, sir, that we had a situation where north of 11,000 pensioners' checks were being printed for every month. So that's almost north of 22,000 checks per month that were being printed. And of course, I know, sir, that pensioners like to go to the post office and to talk with everybody that they're familiar at the post office, and this is part of the experience, if you like, with respect to a number of these matters, which is part of the culture. But as we have seen, sir, since certainly the NAS, the government, working with the stakeholders, has been trying, sir, to encourage as many of the pensioners to on board and get their monies go directly into their bank account for some time. Now, since the onset of COVID, sir, I'm reliably informed that, and I'm sorry that they had to take that for it to happen, but since the onset of COVID, I'm reliably informed by the NAS director, sir, that some 5,600 plus persons onboarded to receive payments into their bank accounts. Because obviously once you got into a situation where the checks can be printed and you don't want to be all over the place, you're trying to protect the elderly, it made sense. And I would love, sir, to take this opportunity to urge our pensioners, those who are still skeptical about this process, and their family members. And I know that, sir, you know, in our families, families are complex. And we all know this, sir, are complex. And pensioners like to see that the pension check come, and they can determine when the check can get cashed and involved in that process, sir. But the reality is, sir, that we have to find a way to work with each other to be able to keep pensioners safe, maintain access to your money, and I want to take this opportunity, as we've done on several occasions, certainly engaging with BARC and others along this process, to continue to urge pensioners to receive their pensions digitally, so that the whole back officer and all of those things that we can deal with, but for your own safety and well-being, know that your pension is secure. Now, here's the thing, sir. For the pensioners who actually get their direct deposits from the national insurance or any of the pension schemes that deliver pensions in the country, your pension is actually paid in full as a one-time transfer for that month. So you actually have greater access, sir, to your money if you determine that you will get the monies directly deposited into your account, as opposed to having to wait until the check date, sir. As you know, the checks are made out with the future dates, and therefore only become effective for the most part once that date has come. Of course, in recent times, we've given directions that obviously, because of the pandemic, that we will honor the facilitation of those things, even though they're prior to the date that they may come in. And the reality is that we have to do that, sir, to respond to give persons cash. So all I'm saying, sir, is that in the same way that we want to facilitate and bring about greater efficiencies, and we talk about growing business and all of these things, the reality is that for the average person, sir, access to your money, and in a sense, sir, financial inclusion, which is the fancy term, sir, is really what all of this is trying to achieve. And for those persons like me, sir, who have very real concerns about carrying around cash and all of those things, sir, I always prefer that I can see a machine that I can do the transaction, because I don't have to worry about whether I got enough money or not, sir, in terms of cash to be able to execute a transaction. I may only have to worry about whether I have enough money in the bank account in order to be able to do the transaction. And I think that for the average person, especially in the middle of a pandemic, sir, it's important that we push our businesses, we push our citizens to utilize the technologies that will be rolled out. And the truth is, sir, right now, whether it is top-ups, because persons can transfer money to others, sir, using their mobile phones from any of the mobile providers. There are a whole range of other facilities for moving cash, which is not necessarily as efficient, but all we are saying is that we are creating an ecosystem, sir, where we would facilitate payments in general, whether that is payments to businesses for goods and services that you may wish to consume. But in the middle of a pandemic, I fundamentally believe, sir, that this would allow a number of entities and enterprises to still be able to conduct business, so long as they are prepared to make the necessary changes internally to be able to facilitate some of that. And the reality is, sir, that is the nuts and bolts of all of this. So that when you go to any website in Barbados, including any of government's websites, to do stuff, and I really want to thank the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, Mr. Speaker, because we have been pushing them to onboard more of our departments in order to be able to roll out a number of payments. Citizens have already started to see, for example, sir, the renewal of driver's licenses as an online process, and I continue to urge citizens, sir, to utilize the platforms, whether it's EasyPay or otherwise, as will come on stream later as options, to please, sir, use these systems. Because it doesn't make sense going to stand up in a line, sir, especially in a COVID environment, but we value your time. And therefore, it makes sense just to do the renewal online. You can go about your business, and the post office can deliver the driver's license, sir. And therefore, there are a range of other services and payments that government is working through that we hope will inspire others within the private sector to start looking at their own systems, such that how you conduct business with the country will change. The reality is, sir, that this is a journey upon which Barbados has made a significant start under this government, and we wanted to accelerate. But it can only accelerate, sir, if people take up the technology and push the people around them, the businesses around them to take up the technology. Because nothing will change, sir, unless we make it change. And the provisions in this bill creates the platform under which all of this would happen. Now, currently, sir, and just by way of explanation, all of us who may have a account with any of the commercial banks and our credit unions, we know that we have you have some type of debit card issue. And as we experience it now, you walk into any store and you use the card at the terminal. And the truth is, we do that without really thinking about what happens to be able to affect that. But the reality is that sometimes you will see, sir, and I hope that this will be a thing of the past, because the regulations that will accompany this particular bill as well will facilitate something known as interoperability. But sometimes you will go to a store, sir, you go to the cashier, and you probably see about 5 or 6 different terminals at the cashier there. And the reality is, that is so that the business obviously can facilitate payments by any of the operators, sorry, who provide payment services in the country to be able to operate. But our simple philosophy is this, Mr. Speaker. Irrespective of where you go, the notion of what we call interoperability means that you should be able to go to any place and present your form of payment, just like cash is the form of payment, sir. And those terminals, we should be able to facilitate the payments irrespective of whoever the provider is. So the central bank, sir, which will regulate the systems under the guidance of the National Payments Systems Council that will be established, will set the rules, sir, under which these things will happen. Of course, sir, it does not mean that overnight that the technology can start talking to one another. But the reality is that this framework now provides the exchange, if you like, the requirement for systems to talk with one another, so that a business does not have to have 5 and 6 and 7 and however many terminals at each cashier to be able to facilitate a payment and obviously increase the cost of their doing business with respect to that. And therefore, these are some of the real functional things that we believe will bring benefits to operators. But the reality is, sir, is that we know that a number of our young people, sir, want to engage in setting up new businesses, wants to attract customers. You will see all of the social media, sir, facilities with this. And at the moment, if you don't have a PayPal account and all kinds of strange shenanigans to hoops to go through, then you really effectively can't do real trade. And I think that as there will be, as a result, a new model, sir, of doing business, that the online provisioning which the ecosystem will contemplate will give any business, but certainly a lot of our young people, sir, who don't have the money to go and rent a space in any of the commercial offices around the country, but who may have some space in the back at their house, sir, to store a few items that they can keep some inventory and keep it rolling, that they too, sir, will be able to be onboarded using whatever technologies are available provided by the payment services providers, so that they too, sir, can be a part of a developing and emerging business community. But I know a number of young people, sir, who are thinking more broadly than just doing business in Barbados. And yes, they will continue to do business in Barbados, but it is their intention to be able to move beyond Barbados and offer their goods and services beyond Barbados. And therefore, the systems that are being contemplated to be a part of the national payments ecosystem, the technologies, is where now Barbados has to pivot, sir, and allow for greater facilitation in this space. The reality is, sir, is that I wish that everybody in Barbados had the same fervor as this government to move this process forward as quickly as we can. And the reality is that we are holding ourselves back by maintaining legacy systems to some degree. And the legacy systems, whilst we know it and are comfortable with it, the reality is that the world is continuing, sir, to march on. And if we are to stop the complaints about how easy it is to go and buy something on Amazon, as opposed to buying something from any business in Barbados, sir, then we have to bridge that gap. And in bridging that gap, we are just creating a framework upon which the execution of e-commerce in the country, and particularly, sir, in a COVID environment that we don't know, sir, the extent to which the impact of COVID-19 will have going forward. And as I said at the outset, sir, it was our intention when we started this journey in 2019 to really have these systems rolled out in 2020. But when we recognized that the different players within the space, sir, were all at different stages, and to the extent that some of the financial institutions were using systems that really and truly, Mr. Speaker, were effectively obsolete for the purpose for which we wanted, then it meant that we had to build the consensus within the financial sector to be able to move this forward. Now, what will equally happen, sir, under these provisions is that the opening up or the democratization of the space, sir, will become a salient feature. As it stands at the moment, sir, there's something called the automated clearinghouse, sir, which is currently owned by the commercial banks. And it is contemplated that that space will be opened up, sir, to allow for more payment service providers. Now, just to be clear, sir, the automated clearinghouse is the facility through which payments go through. Currently, there's a batch process for payments. And if anybody's done any business with anybody in Barbados and you have to transfer money, you always have to wait and check and see, sir, whether or not the money hit the account. And all of us know, sir, what that entails, because at some point we've either somebody says they've transferred money to us, or we have transferred money to people, and there's always this lag in time with respect to when confirmation is actually given that funds have either been received or actually gone to where they are. And the truth is, sir, that technology is outdated, and to the extent that the introduction of a real-time automated clearinghouse facility, plus the opening up of that process to allow more payment service providers to participate in that process, means that along with the existing way that we pay for things, there will be new ways that will be introduced in the near future that will facilitate, sir, the ease of doing business in Barbados. And obviously, sir, there will have to be greater sensitization, not just in the business community, but in the wider public. Because we do have in the country cards that are issued by some banks, sir, that have contactless technology. And contactless technology, sir, is a piece of technology that allows you to pay for regular goods and services. For the most part, the value is usually capped. And let's say, for example, sir, that your card authorizes you just to tap the terminal to authorize payments that are less than $50. Once you go to the pharmacy and you pick up something, sir, and you just walk up to the terminal, you tap your card, authenticates, and you're gone. No PIN, no nothing, sir. It is just there. The reality is, sir, that technology exists in Barbados. But how many people in Barbados actually utilize that technology? It's simply a function, sir, of the availability of those terminals, existing and syncing with one another, sir, across the different systems to be able to do that. Now, why is that important, sir? Because sometimes, sir, you know that you just be in a rush. And you got to put in the card, you got to put in the PIN, and sometimes the thing don't work, the signal lost, all these kinds of things, sir. And the reality is that all of this is intended, sir, to make it as easy as possible for people to pay. But citizens know that obviously that in the background, the payment service providers are vested in ensuring, sir, that when you pay for something, that it is authenticated and that the monies have been deducted from your account validly because you've done so. And as you know, sir, over the years, a number of fraud prevention measures have been put in place to protect customers. And as you know, a number of our cards existing now, persons, whilst there's a PIN requirement for most cards now, most cards, the reality is that you still have instances where, because of the type of machine that may exist in a facility, that you still have to sign. And obviously you can forge signatures, anything is possible. But the systems that we now have to ensure not just protects the consumers, but certainly protects the merchants against fraud or any other nefarious activities, that those technologies obviously are advancing all the time with respect to being able to do this. So the reality is, sir, that we are on a path to transformation. We really, really, really are. And it is my hope, sir, that all business people, all vendors, look at what is going to be possible within the context of being able to facilitate business and make a clear decision, sir, as to how we are going to operate in Barbados on the business side. But equally, sir, that as citizens, I really don't want to be standing up in the line to pay anything, sir. I really don't want to be standing in the line or want anybody to be standing in the line to pay the government revenue. And therefore, our mutual interests with respect to making it easy for people to actually do business requires that, one, yes, we sensitize people as to what is coming down the line in terms of not just technology, the framework that we're putting in place to be able to facilitate these measures, but that the engagement of citizens now obviously now has to be ramped up so that we actually experience, sir, the benefits that we have perceived existed overseas, where we can shop online and go and do all the things when we go to New York or London or wherever, sir, and do it with ease. We want to bring those same types of experiences to citizens as they go about their daily business. We want that a number of our small and medium-sized businesses, sir, that I'll speak very briefly and very quickly, sir, on the fact that for too long, there's been issues related to access to credit for small enterprises, and especially for those who are vendors and in that class of persons who operate in that space. And therefore, we feel quite strongly that you can expand your business, because I know that a number of the innovations that will sit on top of the payment systems would allow for you, whether you're a coconut vendor or whomever, sir, to be able to track your turnover, your revenue, so to speak, sir, your expenses within that context, because the technologies exist, sir, to be able to look at the data that you have going through the digital accounts, which then you can go to any financial institution and demonstrate to them what your turnover, your business activity actually is on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And that with that information, sir, that a number of our small mid-business people will be able to access credit, whether it is $20, $25, $30, $50,000, whatever it is, sir, because a number of our people do make some good money. And if they wish to expand, if they wish to hire more people and go into different areas, then this is a path, sir, forward for a number of those businesses to be able to operate. And the reality is, sir, that I firmly believe that the uptake of a number of these pieces of payment system technologies by any of our young constituents, sir, by any of our young constituents, will help provide better understanding of their business operations, so that their interaction with any financial institution will be less confrontational because you will have enough data, sir, to present to any financial institution who will be chomping at the bit, sir, to provide you with working capital and access to that, because obviously they can clearly see exactly what it is you're earning. And whilst that will not be the panacea, sir, for solving the issues in relation to access to credit, you still have to manage your business. If you manage your business poorly and make bad decisions, then obviously it doesn't matter how much working capital you have, but the reality is we know that we can solve the problem in terms of information by the uptake of these kinds of technologies to assist. Now, I know that a number of the other business support and development programs that exist, not just in government, but even within financial institutions, I believe will benefit from this kind of intervention with their clients, because that is one less thing then that the financial institutions have to worry about, exactly what your turnover is at any given time. And because, sir, in the middle of a pandemic, you may be physically closed, business can still continue because there's online provisioning to be able to facilitate that. And therefore, it really does create, if we take advantage of it, that is, if we take advantage of it, it really does create a situation where the long-term financial impact certainly on your business could be lessened. But of course, you know, sir, that as government, we are intending to execute and accelerate a number of our capital works programs domestically to be able to facilitate these things going forward. But the reality is, sir, is that in the middle of the pandemic where we are, we have to continue to make these transformations in order to ensure that as we come out the back end of the pandemic, that Barbados, sir, Barbados is in a position to truly unleash as much economic activity. It will include, sir, as many people as it can include who may make the decision to come on board and actually utilize these technologies, because as we have stated from the beginning, whilst the economic recovery is critical, it is critical to ensure that people are included as part of the recovery and that people feel the benefits as part of the recovery. And it is my position, sir, that the uptake of these kinds of technologies, including mobile technologies for payments, would facilitate a significantly larger number of participants in the economy that would allow for greater growth and efficiencies to take place. And so, sir, I am pleased to be able to lead this bill today with respect to this. And let me just speak very quickly, sir, on the bill of exchange, which is looking at checks in electronic form. The reality is, sir, that this is a remnant, sir. This is a remnant, and I use that term deliberately, sir, a remnant, because at the Domestic Financial Institutions conference that was held in 2019, sir, the former governor of the Central Bank of Sweden was the guest speaker. And interestingly, sir, as I said, 2019, he spoke by Zoom. And that was long before COVID hit. And I remember we were in the Grand Cell, sir, and the Central Bank governor in Sweden said that he had not written a check, sir, in 30 years. And it was shame, sir, because I had just recently, a few months earlier, written a check to pay for my life insurance. I was shame, sir. But the reality is we accept that checks still remain a part of how we perhaps may manage our cash. But the reality is that this is really a dying piece of technology. And the provisions here allow for the electronic presentation of checks. And the truth is, sir, I have given very clear instructions to the Treasury and all of government and NIS and the like, that government must set the example, sir, and try to reduce the number of checks that we have in circulation. The processes involved in printing checks, sir, reconciling, the whole thing, sir, given the value of it, has become, sir, quite a headache for most financial institutions, and certainly as government, it creates a headache. And therefore, we are working with partners and citizens, sir, to transition away from that. So as I said earlier, whether it is the delivery of welfare benefits or any other benefit that people may get from government, whether it is to how we address the issues in terms of the management of maintenance payments at the port, sir, these are some issues. As you know, sir, with respect to the introduction of the Household Survival Program, we issued cards and the monies are deposited on the cards to be able to facilitate. So we already have a model for that. And therefore, we want to continue in that vein. And I know that today, sir, we will debate another bill in this place that looks at the Barbados identity. And it is contemplated, sir, that under that the facility of the new mobile ID will effectively have a function in it that will be capable of government delivering financial benefits to people, which then obviously, as we have what we call, and I refer to again as interoperability, that person should be able to present, say the ID, and be able to transact business to some degree. But as I say, all of these things, sir, are coming together at the right time, let me add, even though slightly delayed from my perspective, but we have to move forward, sir. We have to move forward, and it is my wish, sir, that all citizens will, having expressed, it's all citizens, sorry, citizens having expressed the need to be able to transact business as they see it, as easily as when they go to Amazon.com, sir, that it is my hope that all of the, not just the payment service providers, but businesses, sir, people, that each of us would take advantage of the opportunity, choose clearly, sir, what is in our best interest in terms of the whatever business type we may wish to operate under, and get on with the business of serving the public. And in so doing, it means then not that we're going to suddenly get rid of all the accounting staff and all the people that are involved in this process. It means now that the business now can pivot and start to focus on some other higher order avenues with respect to service delivery. Because it is important, sir, that certainly employees start to recognize the benefits, and I say employees, sir, employers, businesses, start to recognize the benefits that will accrue to them, the ease with which consumers will be able to do business with the public, or with the private sector, I should say, but equally, sir, with government, and that in that vein, we'll be able to continue to improve the services, financial services across the country. So the Bill of Exchange, sir, just speaks to the fact that we're just going to have a check in electronic form. Is a check that contains a digital representation of the front and the back of a paper check. The truth is, sir, this is a shame to tell, sir, that the last before I moved back to Barbados, sir, in 2010, I recall doing a transaction at a NatWest, and I went to the ATM, sir, stuck the check, because it was strange. It was one of the few times I got a check in the UK. Stuck the check into the ATM, sir. It just how you stick your ATM card in. You put in your card, put in the check, it come back out. Money was on the account, sir, and that was the end of that. So there was no need for me to, you know, sir, when we receive our statements, we get all the checks stapled on the back of it and all of that stuff, sir. The reality is that, and this is 10 years ago, sir. This is 10 years ago. So the reality is that Barbados is still playing catch up with a number of things. But it is my hope, sir, that we can get rid of as many checks as we can get rid of, because once we have the facilities for mobile payments, sir, and those options, then it makes it easier for me to pay you, and I don't have to worry about whether when you turn up at the bank, sir, whether my check bouncing all about Broad Street, sir, because as you understand that term, sir, that you are sure that I have paid you. And therefore, whilst checks really was a form to allow persons to manage their cash, it means that we will make it easier for people to be able to do their business, and that both parties, sir, would have certainty with respect to what they're doing and will be able to feel comfortable that we can move forward with relative certainty with respect to our financial transactions. So, Mr. Speaker, I've spoken a little longer than I had intended. And I say that only for the benefit of my colleagues, because this is important, sir. It really, really is. And I cannot impress, especially in the pandemic, sir, that as government has onboarded a number of its services to be used online, I ask citizens again to please, where government is making these upgrades, if you like, to better serve you, that we want you to be able to take advantage of this so that you can spend your time better. And to the extent that we can only move as fast as we can get the departments digitized, so that when you pay, that the validation and stuff that goes on in the back end equally has to change. So that takes some time, but we are working through, and once we get the infrastructure right with respect to the payment side, MIST is continuing to work on the re-engineering the processes in the back end, so that when you pay us, it is real time, just as as the ACH is contemplated. But equally, sir, that across the private sector, I'm urging citizens to continue to advocate and push for the changes that they really want to see. And the reality is, sir, that I know that innovation will come as a result of this particular piece of legislation. Innovation within the context of the way that business is done in Barbados. And I welcome that innovation, sir. But I continue to urge citizens that we are doing these things in order to help you execute your business easier, whether it's personal business or commercial business in that sense, sir, to do that easier and to give everybody, sir, relative certainty with respect to how they'll go about their personal business. And so, sir, I am happy to clearly bring this bill to the chamber, especially at this time, to set the framework for what will become a national payments ecosystem. We are opening up, liberalizing, having potentially, sir, greater financial inclusion as part of the process. It will not happen overnight, but it really requires each and every one of us, sir, to look at it objectively, what is being offered, and understand that we have to make those decisions that are clearly in our best interest as we operate our individual businesses. The systems are in place. The central bank will be the overarching regulator. It is contemplated, sir, that any issues that may arise out of this will be covered under what will come later under the Financial Services Tribunal, which will cover a whole range, not just the payment side, but a whole range of disputes that may arise in relation to financial services. But that is a piece of legislation that will come soon. But the reality is, sir, that there may come a day that your facial recognition, sir, could be a mode of payment. And therefore, whether it is a card, mobile phone, or otherwise, sir, that the reality is, the reality, you will just take off your mask, sir, and be recognized. But the point is, technology is evolving. And this will give the framework under which a lot of these things could potentially be contemplated and be flexible enough for us to be able to articulate. And so, sir, with those few words, I am obliged to you in this matter, and I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Second. Honorable Leader, Opposition.
Thank you very much, sir. The honorable member who just took his seat, who last spoke, said to us with reference to this bit of legislation before us, this bill, that has been in discussion. It's been the subject of discussion for the last 2 years with the financial community in Barbados. For the last 2 years, it's been in discussion with the financial community in Barbados. I want to assume, subsequent to that, or perhaps even during that process, it has come to the attention of the Cabinet of Barbados as well, and so that all members in the Cabinet of Barbados are apprised as to both the intention of the bill and with reference to its contents as well, and its implications, not only for the financial community in Barbados, but for the Barbados economy and for Barbadians as a whole. 2 years, my view is that notwithstanding what measure of time the Cabinet was afforded to scrutinize it, it seems to me a little bit rushed to the Parliament and through the Parliament of Barbados. It is an important piece of legislation which will impact upon the economic culture in Barbados, which will impact not only economic but social life in Barbados. The fact that, to me, it is rushed here fairly hastily is something over which I am not fully comfortable and certainly not happy. It has not been given, as far as I have heard, and as far as we have been told, any form of scrutiny in the public arena of Barbados. Yet it is a piece of legislation that will affect all of us. You know the phrase whole of society, Mr. Speaker? Well, it will affect the whole of society. But we sit for 2 years with people in the banking system and other elements of the financial community for 2 years. We discuss it with them. We expose our Cabinet colleagues somewhat to it, I imagine. Then we rush it to and through Parliament. And we do not give the public of Barbados the courtesy of a little time to scrutinize the bill. It's not good, Mr. Speaker, in terms of governance. It's not the first time we have seen this. As a matter of fact, it has happened repeatedly. I might have stressed that one of the bills, which is now the subject of debate right now in this instant, is brought here only this morning. Constitutes part of this debate. I do not know that it is the best way to govern. I do not know that in this instance, it is a necessary way to govern. We have had other pieces of legislation come here with haste, Mr. Speaker, and we have acknowledged in that instance or in those instances the need for haste. We have cooperated with the government in those instances, especially when pressure has been brought to bear upon the government by international institutions seeking to have Barbados make corrective measures in its legislative architecture to cover their concerns and to respond to their concerns. We can appreciate those instances. We've supported legislation in those contexts. But I do not know that there needs to be this kind of a rush on this one, such that the public is not allowed a view of this, a time to think upon it, to applaud it, to critique it, or whatever. But that is too often the pattern which we witness with respect to how the government performs on the matter of building legislative platforms in Barbados in these days. By the member for Christchurch, East Central, wants to be able to make mobile payments to coconut vendors. I knew, Mr. Speaker, and you knew as well that he would have said that. Every time we come nigh a subject like this, he repeats that. I have smiled oft at that. He wants, when he stops to buy his coconuts, he can make mobile payments, notwithstanding the fact that the coconut vendor is nowhere near, for the most part, in his league when it comes to access to the kind of technology of which he speaks. Coconut vendor, for the most part, the majority of them are not there. There may be some of them who are better blessed and who have better opportunities. Perhaps they're better located. Maybe they have better sales skills, a larger list or field of customers and clientele. And maybe they've come to the place in life now where they have the technological wherewithal and means to accommodate that type of thing. But the member assumes that because he can, and because others can, that the average fellow out there by the side of the road selling nuts or selling vegetables, ground provision, fruits, coconuts, is interested in that at this stage and can accommodate it. The honorable member for Christchurch, East Central, is a bit out of touch with Barbadian culture when he fails to realize that a guy who sells his coconuts on Sunday mornings, by the time he's done by midday, wants cash in his hand that he can go to the shop down the road and buy something to cook the same Sunday afternoon. He is out of touch with the culture in Barbados when he fails to realize that a guy who sells him these coconuts gladly wants his money so that he can go to that shop, which perhaps is similarly not endowed with the technological capacity to accommodate that type of transaction. The honorable member forgets that a guy who sells the fruits and sells the coconuts needs his cash so that he may take some of those dollars, Mr. Speaker, to the child mother in Bushall and to the second child mother down in Black Rock. We know these people well, Mr. Speaker. We know that this is the life that they lead. And though what we say is not to be discarded, when we say it, we must be careful that we bear in mind the culture in which we operate and the needs of those who are principals in that culture, and who have to live as we do. The majority of Barbadians are not caught up in the check culture, not the dispensing of checks, not the writing of checks, maybe the receipt of checks from government and other entities from time to time, but certainly not the writing of checks. That is a minority in Barbados. It may be a majority in this house, but I don't think the majority of people around Barbados are into the business of walking around with a checkbook. So the check culture is not necessarily an all-pervasive one, embraced by the majority of us. We must be careful, therefore, when we formulate policy and when we speak to present those policy intentions, that we express an understanding, indicate an understanding of the cultural context in which we speak and in which we act. Now, you did mention, and I would have to acknowledge this because I want always to be honest in what I say, that it would be good if the introduction of this bill, the implementation of its measures, would bring about a situation where businesses in Barbados are able to put themselves on a better platform, to profile themselves such that they can better face the world and penetrate external markets. Traditional businesses and new businesses coming on stream. So he did acknowledge that. But it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, that his priority focus depicted Bajans as consumers who will be, by this means, this legislation, facilitated in buying anything, anywhere, at any time across the world. I find that that is part of the problem with our sense of vision, in that we impose in our own minds, those who formulate policy, limits with respect to vision, such that when we formulate that policy or present that policy, those limits reflect themselves. Bajans must be encouraged to see themselves as more than consumers of fare, more than buyers and consumers of products as from abroad, and must be encouraged that whereas the technology gives you access to source products and services from a multiplicity of providers across the world, it also opens the door for enterprise, business, and the spirit of entrepreneurship, and that must be encouraged. We cannot continue to sell to our people a vision which confines them to the space occupied simply by consumers. This is the kind of mindset that is reflected repeatedly in various areas of life. I speak to that often. I will continue to speak to it because we have caused people in this country to believe that the limits to which they can aspire is to be dependent upon a politician for a job, or to be dependent upon some seasonal activity that will give you a few dollars to make you feel happy about a party that you support. Hey, the horizons must be pushed back, and the ceilings must be lifted, and Bajans must be encouraged to see themselves in better terms than that. And if we come with a policy initiative, a legislative plank like this, and we sell it in those terms which project Bajans and Barbadians as consumers of other people's products, then we sell ourselves short. We sell the policy short, and we sell Barbadians short. But Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, what drives this initiative, this policy initiative, we must ask. I try to set these things in a context. I have continually spoken through the absence of any significant indicators of a growth thrust, policy-wise, being undertaken by this government. Others have spoken of that. Now, this is not to gainsay the merits of this piece of legislation, but the question must be asked of the extent to which bringing something like this is indicative of any strong growth dynamic reflecting itself in the Barbados economy. As we look across the Barbados economy today, do we see any strong growth dynamic, any strong growth indicator that this piece of legislation will further facilitate and encourage beyond the level to which it now exists? This government, unfortunately so, I think, deals often in the macro world. Often in the macro world, this government deals. We continue to hear it repeatedly boast of levels of foreign reserves. We hear the Honorable Prime Minister every time she speaks. It's 2.6 billion, 2.6 billion, 2.6 billion. We're hearing that figure in our sleep. Foreign reserves. Continue to boast about its management of debt in the context of an IMF-arranged program. It deals with these macro things to suggest the level of its success. And if it must do that, let it do that. But at the same time, you cannot persist in simply dealing with policies in a peripheral way, which do not address the essence of the needs of the Barbadian economy, which do not in any way constitute a strong, clear vision for a Barbados of tomorrow, the immediate tomorrow, and the distant tomorrow. And that is a fact. So we deal in macro frames, and we come with policy initiatives that treat the peripheral issues. And we expect that that will forever constitute the basis of good public relations and therefore earnest, sustained popularity with the people of Barbados. My view is that it will not. And at some stage, you've got to recognize here's where the rubber meets the road. You may have a lot of foreign reserves, and you may be managing, quote unquote, your debt in the context of the IF program. But unemployment is going through the roof. And then the unemployment situation in Barbados was, in my view, bad before COVID. It's worse, savagely worse since then. You can boast of the macro things, but at the end of the day, the pain exists where mothers can't feed children, where people are finding themselves beggars and losing self-respect and a sense of dignity, where politicians are pressured to help them to keep body and soul together. That is a reality, and anybody in here who is a politician in touch with the people out there, and I imagine all of us are, knows that that is so. The pain is real, and Barbadians have become, and we can't only attribute it to COVID. COVID exacerbated the situation, but it was, that is embedded in the essence of what the Barbados economy is. People work for less than they deserve and less than they're worth, and their skills are undervalued. And that business, that ugly mess business of underemployment has always characterized the Barbadian economy. That is bad in itself, but continues to exist, where a privileged few reap what harvest there is to be had, and too often facilitated in that by administrations in the office of government. Now, that's reality. If you don't think that's reality, ask some folks in the Pine. If you don't think that's reality, ask some folks in Glade Sills up by you, my dear, honorable member. If you don't think that's reality, ask some folks in St. Philip West. I know you don't have to ask Mr. Speaker in St. Michael's Central, in Savannah Road or Station Hill, because you know, I know some of those people well, and I hear their voices too, and I hear their cries. The pain is real. So is it indicative of any strong growth dynamic operating in the Barbados economy right now that we bring this so that we may further that impetus and see greater growth? Is it laying the basis for some new growth strategy that the government leads or facilitates in its emergence? You see, for me, whenever you bring a monetary or fiscal or financial or economic measure, I have to ask myself the question, the context in which it comes, and how does it help to serve to improve that context, especially with reference to growth. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have this. My complaint with this is it's come hastily without public scrutiny, and that perhaps it does not sufficiently address the pain of the context that Barbadians now live. And when we bring these things, in my view, they must do so. I heard a government spokesman on my television on Sunday night asked twice, I think, post-COVID, and a senior advisor too, not a junior one like Masco, not a missing one like Professor Prasad, but one who remains senior and visible and loud and frequent in our ears. And I heard him ask, and I say this for the benefit of the oil member for St. John, because I'm sure he didn't hear. And I have determined that from the rapt attention that he's now paying to what I'm about to say. And I heard him ask twice, I think, post-COVID, what is the strategy for the growth of the Barbados economy going forward? Twice, I'm sure that was asked. His response was the fact that he's an optimist. So optimism is what he will carry forth through this period of COVID until it ends, hopefully, and hopefully soon. And he was told, and I thought wisely so by the caller, optimism is not a strategy. And optimism is not a strategy. Optimism is not a strategy. Maybe your strategy should be accompanied by a measure of optimism, but optimism itself is not a strategy. Now, there are several things which I'm sure this piece of legislation does not attempt to address. But these are things which I constantly will, from this position, remind this government are things and matters of importance. This piece of legislation, in my view, seems intended to facilitate improvement of the economic status quo. In other words, the Barbados economy as it is currently profiled, with the benefits lopsidedly skewed towards a certain privileged bunch and certain sectors, it would seem as though this legislation is intended to make sure that these people can be better served and that their interests can be better served, and that what they cannot now do, they will be facilitated in doing, but the status quo largely is going to remain. The people who live the marginal experience in this economy, unless they are helped to a position, facilitated to a position of betterment, largely will not benefit from this. One or two may be able to break through, but largely they will not benefit from this. This will put our operations in the financial sector, our arrangement, institutional, infrastructural arrangements in the financial sector on a better footing, and therefore those who normally benefit will be better placed and better positioned, but not on a very large scale. Will those who are now having to stand at the distance and watch the goings-on be able to step foot into the arena of success and privilege and advancement in Barbados? This will not address, therefore I'm saying, the obvious economic disparity that exists. This is not in any way going to significantly address that. And all I'm saying is, do this, but also do the things that will address the matter of economic imbalance and economic disparity and skewed privilege in Barbados. Do this. But there are other things which must also be done, which have been left unaddressed, as the honorable member said, to use his words, for a long, long time. There's a lack of capital access. Does not seem to constitute a major concern for this government. It's been spoken of by many, spoken of by myself, I humbly say as well. The matter of access to capital in Barbados, which is a killer of any business impulse, business instinct that most people may have. If you have it, it follows you. If you have it, you're facilitated in gaining more. If you don't have it, you're dead. You're dead before you start. Businesses stall before it starts. It's been a complaint now for years, and we've seen over time the emergence and quick so, as just as quickly, the disappearance of small and medium-sized businesses in Barbados. And this government must see its responsibility, especially with its mandate, to change these things. So do this, do this. Do it properly. Let the public have a view of it. Do this, but do the other things which are absolutely essential, critical. Capital consolidation in this economy continues to be a bugbear, and it could only be further entrenched by policies which do not take note of the plight of the poor or the marginalized or the excluded. And this government continues to reflect a posture which suggests it will facilitate privilege by its policies and its relationship connections. And that is unfortunate. Post the mandate of 2018, that is unfortunate. You may look at me with consternation in your expression of my comment, but you will find that that comment is one that finds currency outside there by many who are learned and some who are not as learned. And that is the reality that we have, this government has to address. So that consolidation of capital, part of some, lack of capital, part of others, that is the reality out there. So I say to you, do this. You do this, but your mandate requires you to do these other things as well. We would like to see that out of this platform, we see the emergence of indigenous capital interests in more enterprising and foreign revenue earning activities than that which we have traditionally seen. In other words, where capital resides in Barbados, its interest has been localized and limited in retail and consumption and construction that sometimes drains our foreign exchange more than earns us foreign exchange. So where this facilitates existing indigenous capital, I pray that there would be an encouragement to more enterprising forms of economic investment in this country that has benefited them by so many profits over the years. To continue simply to settle for a profile of retail, of construction that impacts foreign reserves, profile of economic activity and enterprise which does not earn us foreign exchange to a sufficient level, but drains our foreign exchange and entrenches a retail culture, consumption culture, is a tragedy. And I hope and pray that those who are in a position to benefit from this legislation will find through it new ways of improving their position, not only improving their position, but diversifying the character profile of the enterprise such that it benefits Barbados. Now, this legislation addresses the financial sector, including the banks, and the question always must be, in my view, the broad question must also be philosophically, what is happening, redevelopment in the financial sector in Barbados? What is happening, development of the banking and other areas of the financial sector in Barbados that squares with a positive, strong vision for growth for Barbados. It seems to me banks operate in one world, and the thrust of the Barbados economy perhaps may exist or maybe going in another direction. All I'm saying is legislation brought by government to facilitate betterment in the financial culture and in the financial institutional life of Barbados should be such that it takes cognizance of what developments are taking place in that financial setting and how that development squares with our growth vision for Barbados. Are banks facilitating that? Or are they simply ripping off the Barbadian economy? Are banks facilitating that growth vision where it does exist? Or are they simply ripping off the Barbadian economy and earning profits upon profits upon profits, even in these COVID times? That, I believe, is an important question. And I say again, lest I be misunderstood or misquoted, do this, but consider those other very critical things which are still left undone, and which by force of your mandate you're called upon to do. Now, many of the pieces of legislation brought in this Parliament in recent time, months, and last year, have been brought out of a sense of obligation, out of a sense of force, have been brought under the strictures of the institutional dictatorship of global players. The global institutions demand it. Barbados fears its brand, or it fears for its brand. Barbados fears penalty and loss. And so we rush to come to the Parliament to put in place legislation required, demanded of us by the dictates of international financial and trading institutions. And while the honorable member spoke, especially in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, I wondered if that is the sense with which this legislation was propelled as well, and why it has ultimately come here without what I call necessary scrutiny by John Public, to the extent that John Public holds an interest. Is it that we're, again, feeling the pressure of having to comply with the wishes of the IMF, other institutional financial institutions? I also get a sense that we feel that the technology is there, so technology drives us. And yes, you have to comply internationally because you're a community player. And yes, the technology is there, we must use it. But I'm trying to emphasize that such things here must be driven by a sense of a vision for a better Barbados economy. And if it does not have that as its basis, then we miss the mark, in my view. I will obviously support those of us on this side, as I like to say. A few of us on this side would like to support this considered mechanism, believing that it can expand the range of payment instruments and services available to Barbadians, which is a good thing once we push beyond the point of seeing Barbadians simply as consumers. Creates new opportunities for entrepreneurs and self-employed, and also creates an impetus for market penetration. If there's one thing that is glaring, is that because of our small size, our small economic size, our small market size, and even in the context of the region, our small market size and economic space, we have to use every possible means to penetrate the market space in the global context, push back the horizons so that Barbadian creativity, initiative, Barbadian skills, Barbadian products and services may find their niche in this world. Support this to the extent it introduces cost efficiencies and therefore provides for savings for Barbadians. Technology should help us to achieve some efficiencies within the financial systems, both at the level of the major players and the smaller players. And those efficiencies should result in some cost savings to the average Barbadian. And that it, as the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central emphasized, provides a climate and a context in which we can see more non-cash transactions, while we bear in mind culture of which we are a part and the means available to the majority of our people who do not live the experience that the majority perhaps in here do live. In fact, they eke out an existence in the harsh reality of today's Barbados economy. There have been recent turbulence with which we're very familiar in the financial world, distant from us. We've had turbulence in the financial and capital markets in the United States, which have impacted the world, which have impacted us as part of that global setup in the past. Quite near at home, we're very familiar with the goings on with respect to CL Financial, its related companies here in Barbados, the Clico saga. All of these things should recommend to us caution and suggest that we employ the greatest possible scrutiny rather than limit scrutiny of this piece of legislation to just the eyes and ears and minds and biased thinking of the major players, biased interests, I should say, of the major players in the financial world. The lessons learned from these experiences around us and the farther field must be that we be prudent and be cautious and be wary. The domino effect is a significant dynamic which can take place where one player in the system, as we're seeking to establish, is unable to meet his commitments, all of his commitments at the time of obligation. And then you have the domino effect in larger economies like the United States and elsewhere. We've seen this type of thing wreak havoc on the lives of persons, the well-being of persons. In a small economy context like Barbados, one mess up can bring the whole thing down in a catastrophic way. That is why we have to be cautious. And that is why we can't simply hear the views of those who are players, big players in the financial sector. We need to ensure that the regulatory framework we are establishing is not one which is rushed, is one which takes on board considerations and issues related to all players, both sides of these issues, and that the loopholes for consumers are closed off. Other players in the system are not exposed to peril. And the Central Bank of Barbados is a major player in this thing. Section 5 of the bill speaks to, on page 20, Mr. Speaker, the bill that I have, unless there's another iteration of it, the operational role of the central bank, Section 5. The central bank may support the operations and participants of a payment service. The central bank may, in the fulfillment of its role pursuant to subsection 1, establish, own, operate, and participate in the ownership or operation of a system. Central bank will act as a central counterparty to participants. Open and hold accounts for any operator or participant, which may be used for the clearing and settlement of transfers into a system. Central bank may hold securities and accounts for any operator or participant, which may be used for the meeting of settlement requirements. Central bank may extend intraday credit to entities that are participating in a system where it has been granted adequate collateral. Act as central securities depository for government securities issued in accordance with the Central Bank of Barbados Act. That is section 5 on pages 20, 21. It gives an operational role to the Central Bank of Barbados. And if you follow all of those stipulates, each one itemized, you see, for Mr. Speaker, the potential for abuse, the potential for corruption is real. One is not being suggestive in one's comments in this moment. One is simply saying the reality exists, that there's potential for abuse and potential for corruption. And in the context of a small economy where one mess up can bring the whole castle down in a catastrophic way, I believe we need to pay attention very carefully to that which we pass in this House. Now, with respect to the central bank, we address the matter of tenure, security of tenure with respect to the governor, other members of the board, and some legislative changes were made to address that and to take the politics out of the situation in this very parliament. We suggested not too long ago. We also addressed the matter of government financing by the central bank to make sure that we don't return to positions where the central bank government felt a creature of the government, a victim of the wishes and whims of the government, and thereby central bank policy was politicized to the extent that lending assistance to the government exceeded levels which were considered to be prudent. So we addressed these matters, addressing the matter of the governance of the central bank. We put in place a veto mechanism which gives power to the head of state of Barbados. Now that is new, and I said then, and with your permission, I simply repeat the concern I have, Mrs. Speaker, is that we give veto power to the head of state with respect to the dismissal of the governor of the central bank in the new context in which he or she serves his or her tenure. And we do that without having a knowledge or even an idea as to what the construct of head of state of Barbados 1 year from now will look like. Because in this very parliament, we have made it clear it is this government's intention to change the constitutional way in which our country is run with respect to its structure, and to move to some form of republican status. But we have not given any idea as to what will befall the office of the head of state, how that will be filled, if there will be change, and the nature of those changes. But the legislation that we passed just a couple months ago provides that that veto power be given to the head of state. We accept that. I express caution without knowing what the construct of the head of state may look like. We may very well, therefore, depending on how that construct materializes, find ourselves back where we were, where we thought we had departed. And I hope I am clear, Mr. Speaker, in what I am saying with respect to that. I am trying to do no injury to the office of the head of state. I'm trying not to reflect negatively on the intentions of the government. I'm simply saying we do not know, but we passed legislation which speaks to that office without having an idea as to the construct that we're going to be dealing with. In section 7 of the legislation, Mr. Speaker, it talks about the establishment of a payment system council, and the schedules will suggest to us how that body of persons is to be arrived at. And in section 7, it speaks to that on page 22, Mr. Speaker. And in the schedule on page 59, it talks about the construction or composition of that council, 10 members, 3 appointed by the minister by instrument in writing, 2 members on recommendation of the central bank, 1 on the recommendation of Financial Service Commission, 1 on the recommendation of the Barbados Cooperative Credit Union Limited, 1 on the recommendation of the Barbados Bankers Association, 1 who shall have recognized experience in business. It does not tell us who will appoint that. Finance, economics, or law. 1 member who shall represent the interests of consumers, and it does not indicate how those persons are chosen and by whom. And maybe I'm missing a point of law, how law is written, but it seems to suggest to me as a layperson that that is left open into question, whereas all the other appointees are given specificity as to how their appointments take place with respect to those 2 members. There is no such specificity in the schedule. Section 7, I think, Mr. Speaker, also speaks to the matter of licensing. Does it? Is it section 7? I don't think it's section 7, but this bill also speaks to the matter of licensing. Mr. Speaker, yeah, I think it's section 7. Speaks to the matter of licensing. The point I want to make is that the central bank is expected to approve licenses. Central bank is expected to approve licenses for these players, Mr. Speaker, within a period of 3 months, which I think, albeit we seek to expedite business, albeit we seek to facilitate business, albeit we seek to improve the business climate in Barbados and to avoid bureaucratic delays and lethargy, albeit those things are real and must be addressed. 3 months seems a quick time to me. I'm not a financial expert. I just raise it because that's the way it hits me. It may not hit any other person in the world that way. But 12 weeks seems a short time when you consider the importance of the licenses and the weight which they will each carry. Section 10, I should have said, section 10. I don't know what obtains.
Honorable clause, not sections.
Clause. As you well, you're proving what I said. I'm not a legal person, but I'm sure you understand me completely. Clause 10. Yeah, that speaks to licenses under section 1. Right, Mr. Speaker, I got it right? Clause 10, section 1. Right, speaks the 3-month period for receiving and approving these applications. And I think that is important, but I got it right or wrong in terms of the adequacy of time. I thought it worth mentioning. And is this clause 8, Mr. Speaker? Clause 28, sorry, part 5. And operators shall establish written rules. These are the important things that operators do. These are very important things, the critical things that operators do under clause 28 and section 1 and section 2 of the rules to regulate the system, part 5 at page 36. Did I get it right, Mr. Speaker? Operators shall establish written rules for the governance, management, operation of the system. The operator's license operate, including a minimum rules for, and it goes on. Very important, very, very important functional, critical areas. And I don't know that we should be hastening within a 3-week period to give an approval over matters like that. But like I said, I'm not the expert in that area. I raised that for what it is worth. And transparency of fees is mentioned at clause 33 on page 39, which I think is important. The central bank shall require an operator, participant, a payment service provider, an agent which imposes a fee or any consumer for providing a service under the national payment system to provide notice for the imposition and the amount of fee to the consumer in accordance with subsection 2. And then that notice period is stipulated going on in that clause, Mr. Speaker. I say that only to say this. You and I know that the practice currently is that sometimes we wake up to the overnight introduction of fees in the banking system, and we have no redress when the banks impose these fees almost overnight upon us, just about for everything, as though they seek to compensate for their losses, the losses which they suffered when government shaved their heads in the debt restructuring exercise a couple of years back. So I'm glad to see that we're stipulating that adequate notice be given to people when changes with respect to fees are to be put into effect, and that there be a transparency about the process. I will bore you, Mr. Speaker, no further beyond this point. Simply to say, my position is, do this, but do the other things which continue to be left undone, because your mandate demands that you do those things. And while you do this, do it properly. Properly, in my view, includes the country benefiting from the ability to peruse it. Adequacy of time for comments, because it is all embracive and all pervasive. I thank you, sir.
Honorary Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel a little bit like a stormtrooper in this, that I'm going to take off the headgear so that hopefully I'll be better. I will be better understood.
Do I have the privilege of standing on a point of privilege? I really can't understand what the honorable member is saying. I missed a lot of what the honorable member for St. Mike for Christchurch East Central said. He spoke through a mass. The honorable member is speaking through a mass, which is her right. I'm just registering that I'm unable properly to hear what was said just now.
You talk to my honorable member. Honorable Leader, I was thinking you talk to you, Mike.
I'll remove one of them, and that should suffice, because I know that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition does not rest well at night without regularly hearing my voice, so I wouldn't want to deprive him of that privilege. Mr. Speaker, I trust that I'm being well heard in the chamber now. Perfect. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my voice to this debate to support the bill that is before the House, but also to address what I think are some of the opportunities not yet realized by the bill as presented. It's important for me to be able to do that because having been sent here by the good people of St. Michael South Central, a very diverse constituency that represents all kinds of businesses and business people, including a couple of the coconut vendors that were repeatedly referenced today. It's a very popular occupation for these purposes, it seems. But including everybody from finance and insurance companies who are domiciled in that constituency, to people who live there and have set up companies there, set up small and medium businesses there, and for whom this bill has some implications. But I want to say something very clear, in part to address what was raised by the Honourable Member for St. Michael West. And that is to say that this bill is the beginning of a process. That is the way I see it. That is what I think it must be, because it does not, in itself, speak to all of the things that need to be addressed. But legislation often doesn't happen in that way. As those of us who are in the business of helping to craft legislation are aware. So, this is the beginning of a process. The Honorable Member for St. Mike for Christchurch East Central kept using the word framework, which is not a word that I often like, but it is a word that is applicable here. It is essentially the bones of a house. It is, again, as the Honorable Member said, the laying of a track upon which we can determine how fast we want to run. We can determine whether we want to walk. We could determine, like some of us regrettably have done, that we don't want to exercise at all. And so this bill is perhaps different from many others that have come to this chamber, because what it does is it starts to have the conversation, and it starts to set the ground for what needs to be done in the financial services sector. And why is it necessary? It is actually necessary for some of the same reasons that both the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and the member who introduced the bill referenced, which is that for a long, long time, as long as I've been alive at least, the issue of payments and how Barbadians interact with the financial system, the domestic financial system, the global financial system, has been limited to commercial banks and credit unions and established financial institutions. And we have been takers in this economy of whatever banks set as policy in other places. Because banks are headquartered in other places. They set the policy, in some cases without having visited Barbados or seen it on a map. And we have spent decades as takers of policy, as products, of services, of fee structures. And what this legislation begins to do is to clear the way for that kind of single approach or singular approach to how we consume financial services, how we use financial services as inputs to our own entrepreneurial activities. Is to say, listen, banks cannot run things. There has to be the opportunity for others in this space to be able to say, I want to be a part of the national payment system. I want to be a financial entrepreneur so that I can come in and help build a product, build an app, be a service provider in a space that was once run by banks that are governed by other people in other places. And that's what this piece of legislation starts to do. A couple of years ago, I was doing some work on I often say on the continent, and people want to know what I mean, on the African continent. I was in Pretoria. And we visited a market. And those of us who were getting ready to visit that market were saying, well, starting to say, how much cash do you think we're going to need? We were saying to our host, how much cash do you think we're going to need? What are we going to need there? And they kept saying, no, it's fine. Just bring what you have. Just bring your cards, bring whatever you have. And we were able to go, I was able to go to that market and buy and pay for beads, the little beads that you make jewelry with, and pay for fish, and pay for flowers, using a card that I already had. Every single vendor in that market had a little thing that you put on the top of your mobile phone, and you swipe the card, and that payment goes to them. And because those vendors were also integrated into a payment system where they could use what they had been paid, they didn't, like the coconut vendor that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition referred to, they were not relying on cash, the cash that they would have gotten from the day's takings, to go and do their business. Because they were now a part of a system where they could receive payment, but then also use that same technology to pay for their children's school fees and to do the things they needed to do. The vision that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition is calling for is reflected not just in this legislation, but also in that market in Pretoria that could very well have been Cheapside or Oistins or the market that was set up some time ago on the Mighty Grinder Highway. The challenge is that, not that a coconut vendor might not get there, because I fear that we are trying to suggest that Barbadian people cannot absorb technology and participate. We are trying, and I wouldn't even say we, the Honorable Member, it's for the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, it seems to me, is trying to box in Barbadians and say a coconut vendor will never be able to do what you are suggesting. And I disagree with that. Where I agree is that we have to bring all Barbadians along. And so it is not enough to be able to pass the legislation, but we have to make sure that there is uptake of the technology. And it's not a small thing. The Honourable Member for St. Peter, I think it was a couple of days ago on the occasion of the World Day for Social Justice, I think it was, shared some remarks that struck me as critical for what we're discussing here. And it had to do with social justice as in the new digital economy. And how do we make sure that when we bring this new technology, we're not leaving out groups of people? That is key. And it is the reason why the Honourable Member for St. James, the Minister of Energy and Small Business, St. James Central, has been working so hard on this financial literacy program that ministry is rolling out for across Barbados. Because we have to make sure that we are not creating things that do not see the kind of uptake that would make them successful. And so I think that, and that's what I mean when I say this legislation cannot stand on its own. There's so many things that are required in order to have it take effect. And this issue of financial literacy is one of them. One of the things that we've discovered and that we've known for some time is this issue of people who are unbanked or underbanked. So we are busy creating a system of technology or technological capability, and there are people who don't have a bank account, there are people who don't have a credit union account, there are people whose whole lives are cash-based. But here's the issue. While we might say leave them alone, they're good with their cash. They're not good with their cash. Let me tell you why. Because they don't have the wherewithal to have any kind of financial footprint. It puts them in a difficult position when they have to establish a credit history, when they have to face a financial institution to try to get some kind of loan, or to just interact with the world in terms of financial transactions. So the issue of being unbanked is one that we have to address. But here's the issue. Many of those people would prefer not to present themselves to a commercial bank or even to a credit union. Because for anti-money laundering and other reasons, and some that go beyond anti-money laundering reasons, but in some cases where banks just err so much on the side of caution and conservatism that there are so many requirements put on the average person to almost justify that they exist in the world. Prove to me that you exist in the world, the banks say to us. You need to bring 9 pieces of identification to show me that you exist in the world. And for so many people who do operate in many ways in the margins, who don't have a light bill and a water bill and a broadband bill and all of the different pieces of documentation, it is important for us to help create a system that goes beyond a commercial bank. That says to those people, there is a space for you that as you build up a financial footprint, as people get more comfortable with new technology and so on, there is a way that they can participate in markets. Because let us be clear, when people are excluded from markets, including social insurance markets, they lose. Look how many examples we have of people who are outside of the national insurance system. And we talk about an informal market and having to make it visible. Yes, we have to make it visible. But the challenge with the informal market is that people lose. Because if we are not able to bring them in and make them and their needs visible, then they do not benefit. That is the reason that we had to help restructure, to add value to the NIS system almost a year ago when COVID hit, because we had self-employed people who did not have the entire range of benefits that others had. And we had to say, listen, this is something that we have to fix. And we had to come up with a benefit in the context of COVID that will be able to reach the self-employed. But I don't want us to believe that being unbanked is something glorious and wonderful, and that we can leave those people in the margins and say, those people are in the margins, and y'all are not relating to them. No. We need to make sure that people are not invisible in the financial system, they're not invisible in the social security or social insurance system, so that if something happens, if they become ill, if they have an injury, if they become pregnant, that they're able to have access to the benefits of the state so that they can continue to live their best lives, so that they continue to be covered, and that they can continue to be productive. And that is the importance of a bill like this. Now, one of the other things that this makes possible is, how do we bring Barbadian products to global markets? And I have to believe the Honorable Leader of the Opposition when he says that he has not been able to hear us clearly through our masks. Because I distinctly heard from the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central that the way that he framed the conversation about Barbadians going on Amazon as a marketplace and so on was not just in terms of consumers. That was what I heard. Perhaps it's because I was sitting right in front of him. But the argument that he made was that Barbadians also want to create our own marketplace. I listened to the Honorable Member for St. James Central a few days ago talk about such a marketplace, talk about the extent to which his ministry is working on being able to bring together several Barbadian brands, some regional brands, in one single space that is not dissimilar from Amazon and others, where Barbadian products can compete and where people can see in one place what is available to them. Now, if we don't have a payment system such as the one that is contemplated in this legislation, that is not possible. And so my understanding of what was presented earlier is that this kind of the technology that this legislation makes possible allows for that to happen. So by no means are we framing Barbadians solely as consumers. We are saying that the innovation and the ingenuity that is currently reflected in Barbados, in those entrepreneurs that I see in Tweedside Road, in Halls Road, in Belleville, in Colamarock, and all over St. Michael South Central, can be facilitated. I remember for St. Peter, it's carried me very far away from St. Michael, but but that those ideas can be brought to the global marketplace through this kind of legislation. Now, there is something, though, that I need to say about the legislation to the extent that it does not attempt to go as far as the entire payment system infrastructure that the finance division will eventually bring. It does not go as far, and but we do expect that this legislation, once regulations are developed, and other pieces of legislation will together create that entire ecosystem. And I'll tell you what I mean. The role of the Central Bank of Barbados in consumer protection is one of the things that is addressed, that is mentioned in the legislation. And I say mentioned because I don't think it's fully addressed. I think that the role of the central bank has a lot to do with the matter of transparency of fees. And it is one thing to see clearly that something is coming, but if I can see a train coming, it doesn't mean that when it hits me, it will hit me any softer. And what I am encouraging in the crafting of these regulations is that we sit back and carefully consider a strengthened role between the central bank, the Payments Council that is being established, and the Financial Services Tribunal legislation that will soon come, to act together with this legislation to make sure that that consumer protection role is strengthened. This legislation doesn't go far enough to do that, but it does not attempt to, because through the Financial Services Tribunal and through the setting up of the Payments Council, which is very much like the UK payment systems regulator that now exists in the UK. The UK payment systems regulator is one that is very much concerned with making sure that payments are transparent, that people are not taken for granted, but also that there are not runaway fees that are obtaining. And this is important. I wouldn't know how to stand in this honorable chamber and not to make representation, not just for the process of the fee setting, but for the value of fees. Because on behalf of those small and medium enterprises that are currently operating in St. Michael South Central, I happen to know that the question of fees as an input to their businesses is one about which they're concerned. But I have the confidence in the honorable member who has brought this bill, that in the setting of the regulations that are so critical for this legislation, that those things will be addressed. This legislation has to be the bones of the house. It has to be the track, because if it is too detailed and too burdensome, then all of the different innovations that many of the young people that I know are coming up with in the financial services sector would not see the light of day. Because if you are too prescriptive in a sector that is so dynamic, then you run the risk of crowding out some of these ideas. Some of these ideas that form part of the growth strategy that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition keeps mentioning, even though he has heard my voice on the matter several times. But that only confirms my hypothesis, sir, that he does like the sound of my voice. So I won't go back into the aspects of that strategy that I've already covered. But I will say that the issue of the fees and behavior of banks and other financial institutions will be addressed, not just in this legislation, and importantly its regulations, but through the Payments Council, through the Financial Services Tribunal, and through new fair credit reporting legislation that is also in the works. Now, one of the things that I also want to reflect on is that this entire area of work is a work in progress. Now, we are rolling out a vaccination strategy, a COVID-19 vaccination strategy, and we've asked people to send WhatsApps and emails. And we also had to make sure that they could also call on a landline, because not everybody can send a WhatsApp. I only about 2 weeks ago, I convinced my father to let me give him a smartphone. And I frame it that way because it was a fight. Because he felt that the phone could on its own do things that he would not be able to control. Right? And this is a man that didn't raise a fool, so he's not a fool. So I think that while we take the time to bring people along, we also have to make sure that people do not feel too afraid of technology. We have to make sure that we demonstrate the value of the technology, because what we realized is that there were people for whom, in the context of the vaccination strategy and the registration, some of us had to send emails for them and send WhatsApps for them. And making sure, taking the time to introduce people to technology doesn't mean that you expect the uptake to happen overnight. And so it is a point that has been made in this debate that I take. That it is a point that was made by the Honourable Member for St. Peter that I take. That social justice in the context of a digital economy means that you meet people where they are. What it does not mean is that you stop. What it does not mean is that you refuse to go forward because you have different populations within your society. Policy making is about knowing your different populations and setting policy that responds simultaneously to each of those populations. It doesn't mean that you stop moving because, oh dear, some people might not catch on as quickly. You set your policy, you set off down the road, and you make sure that everybody, in the way that you implement, in the different things that you're able to introduce, that everybody comes along with you. I am holding the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central. My mother used to say, I'm watching him with a narrow eye, because I expect these regulations to address the consumer protection and fees issues. It is an opportunity that we cannot miss. We have to make sure that in the discussion of those regulations, in the rolling out of those regulations, that all the people who need to be at the table are there at the table. Because it is not just about big business. It is not just about the banking, the commercial banks. It is not even just about the credit unions. It is about many other players that have a perspective on this. And I think that perspective should be brought to bear. I have every confidence, Mr. Speaker, that that perspective will be brought to bear. And with those few words, sir, I commend this bill to this House.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me thank both members who contributed to the debate. And just to respond just very quickly to give any further clarity that I can. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition referred to a hasty presentation of this bill to this Parliament. And he made reference to the fact that I indicated that I personally started this effort with all of the stakeholders, Mr. Speaker, in January of 2019, to be able to transform the way that we do business in Barbados in a relatively seamless way. And I go back to reflect on the fact that when we put the and the other member for St. Michael South Central would attest, we could not put every single reform that we would undertake when we crafted the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. Because when we, and the Honorable Leader of the Opposition is well aware as to the planning that took place when we were down in the other place, the real Parliament, sir. when all the members in this chamber, engage in various discussions with stakeholders, as you may recall, Mr. Speaker, when the Leader of the Opposition was a part of some of those discussions, in terms of the breadth on the scope of what was required to transform Barbados when we took office in May of 2018. And so, the reality is that whilst it was not identified as part of, you know, the framework that was laid for the Burke Plan in words, payments remain a critical aspect of how we expect, one, first and foremost, government to do its business with citizens, but equally to transform the way that private enterprise is engaged and to include as many people in the economy. And we set about as part of our social compact, if you like, to ensure that our economic recovery was as inclusive as possible. Now, of course, I'm speaking in a COVID context, where a large part of the economy, as we know it, is not functioning in the way in the same way that when we took office 2 years ago, and therefore it requires us even now to further accelerate the reforms such that, not just as it relates to tourism and those related entities, but we give breadth and space, Mr. Speaker, sir, for as many Barbadians to engage and execute their own plans, whether personal or otherwise, such that we can engineer, in a sense, a faster recovery from this COVID environment, which we all want. And so, and to be fair, Mr. Speaker, this legislation was prepared and engaged with the stakeholders that are involved for the most part in the background. Because as I said, sir, the average citizen, and this is let me just give a little more clarity and precision. Cars, as we know it, sir, the strip cars that we all had, sir, have been in circulation now for the better part of almost 25 years, sir. And the reality is that there has been no upgrading, sir, if you like. And I recall too, sir, when those cars were being issued, the anxiety that people had at the time as to whether or not people would actually use the cars in the terminals and whether or not they would be widely available, and the concerns that people had at the time. I was a youngster, but I remember it because I was all too happy to, when I had my first bank account, to receive the car to go and start to do business, because I felt it was more convenient for me to either to pop into an ATM any part of the country, Mr. Speaker, at the time, and withdraw money, even though you had to pay if it wasn't your bank. But the convenience of being able to do that, sir, I think most Barbadians now value tremendously. But at the time, there were similar concerns about whether or not these systems would work. But what happens often too much in Barbados, sir, is that we make an intervention and we don't have periodic, sir, boosters, if you like, since we talk about vaccines and these kinds of things, periodic boosters to help us to keep pace with respect to the changing environment. And it is contemplated in this framework, in this bill, and the ecosystem that we are developing, that we don't ever go back to a stage where we feel that one piece of technology will solve the entire picture. People will have options. And in those options, sir, as I articulated, if you want to run in lane 1, sir, you can run in lane 1. If you want to run in lane 4 or 5, sir, then you will run in lane 4 or 5, and that will be your choice as a business, as an entity, to be able to engage. And they use that reference, sir, because we're giving everybody the same shot, same chance. And you will determine, sir, not just in terms of the choice of payment service provider that you will have, but equally what are the kinds of services that you may wish to engage. My preference, sir, if I was to advise any business person in Barbados, my preference would be to open up your business so that anybody, any part of the world could buy from you. That would be my advice. It means that you have to change some of your internal business processes to be able to facilitate that. And therefore, once you start to reorient your mind, sir, and as the Prime Minister says, we want all business to be global, in a sense, and all global business to be local from that perspective, so that we can open up our space, sir, and allow for more participation, not just locally in the economy, but for our products and services to be as easily accessible globally, such that any citizen, any part of the world, which I think I think I said this before, any citizen, any part of the world will be able to purchase any good or service from people in Barbados, utilizing obviously the global supply chain as part of it, and be able to earn a living. And so the notion that this bill has been rushed to the Parliament is something that when we started this journey in January of 2019, there was no contemplation or any dictates from the IMF or anything or any such entity, because you will, if the honourable member was paying attention to the Burke Monitoring Committee, he realized that this bill is not one of the structural benchmarks or reforms as part of the Burke plan. But it is critically important as part of the government's objectives, as are a number of other reforms that are important, to be able to transform the economy. Because you can't identify every single thing in the document that is required for transformation. So we've got on with the business, sir, of signaling to all the financial players what is required of them currently, equally signaling to all others through this process that this is the kind of payment ecosystem that Barbados wants for its citizens, such that we can expose citizens to global commerce and allow for the adequate expansion of business, and to allow our citizens equally the same comfort to be able to access goods and services outside of Barbados in a way that is relatively seamless. So this has been a process where the stakeholders have made determinations and investment, because as I speak, all of those cards that have the magnetic strip, sir, because of this process, all of those cards for all of the financial institutions now will carry what is the chip and pin technology, which is a much more secure facility that would allow any Barbadian to be able to use their debit cards, which is linked to their bank account, sir, to be able to engage in e-commerce without having to use their credit card. And why is that important? Because at the end of the day, we've had a system where, in order for you to be able to make transactions, certainly outside of Barbados, you have been forced to use your credit card, which, as you know, sir, credit cards have higher fees associated with it than debit cards. And therefore, as we move forward, Barbadians now will have the option made available to them as to when you go to Amazon or any other entity for that matter, that you would have the option to determine whether you use your debit card, Mr. Speaker, or your credit card. And the use of your debit card in of itself, because it's your money, credit cards, obviously the bank is lending you money, you have a choice. And therefore, the technology as it emerges, sir, and the suite of products that will come through as part of the payment system, in a sense, will give greater consumer choice, and therefore, as a result, will have greater benefit to the public. And so the reality is that we are setting a framework not just for the business people. We're not just setting a framework for government. We're setting a framework for which the average citizen will be able to conduct their business with the widest possible choice to be able to transact that business, and they will understand that how you manage your credit card versus your debit card, and that now becomes critically important within that. So the reality is financial literacy will continue to be driven certainly across the board with the full support of the ministry. All of the players have agreed to these as we roll out, obviously, the options to the first and foremost to the clients, equally with respect to citizens who will in fact receive or in the process of receiving their chip and PIN cards. These are the things that people have been asking for some time, and therefore it is just now the framework that facilitates these things. Let me say, sir, that this bill is, and just to make it, the regulations that will accompany this bill, sir, and it is something that I did not address in my introduction. The reality is that mobile payments and those other types of technologies, digital currencies, assets, will be contemplated to be covered, obviously, in the regulations, such that the flexibility for any new technologies that are come on stream will be managed within the context of the regulations. Why is this important, sir? Because in a very dynamic global system, we've given through the bill the widest possible berth with respect to the central bank to be able to manage and to bring on and deal with financial innovation in a way that is structured. And therefore, the contemplation is that whilst persons have gotten very familiar, sir, with the use of cards and the card at the point of sale, over the course of the next few months and years even, I anticipate there will be a transition as you already have, sir, quite a high level of smartphone use in the country. The use of mobile payments and the options available therein will come on stream. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central referred to the experience in the markets in Pretoria in relation to that matter. And the reality is, sir, whether it is a taxi that you pick up at the airport, and the metering of fares and all of those things, sir, whether it is Cheapside or down Mighty Granite Highway or Oyston, sir, or Waterhall Land, sir, in your constituency, anybody that is wanting to, there's some good songs, sir, over there, but I know that you wouldn't know that, but anybody that is operating, sir, any business will be capable of utilizing these types of services, which will help them, obviously, to be able to transact business a lot easier. But the thrust of this exercise is to lay the foundation. The technologies will come on stream because the framework is in place to facilitate it. And the Honourable Member for St. Michael West referred to the time frame within which licenses will be given, and those and question whether or not the 3 months is a long enough time to be able to make a decision. The reality is this, sir. With the appropriate submission of documentation and due diligence in this environment, it is not that 3 months is necessarily a quick time. You have reputable companies that operate either locally, regionally, globally, and have a track record. As we have conversations, central bank to central bank, sir, regulator to regulator with respect to these matters, any company that is expected to come into the space, whether locally or otherwise, sir, will be expected to face the same scrutiny. But where a company is operating in another jurisdiction and wants to come into Barbados now to be a part of this payment ecosystem and have a track record, then obviously regulator, sir, will communicate. And we feel that once all of the matters are addressed that are required for submission of information to establish a service in Barbados, then 3 months is definitely a short enough time frame to give certainty as a yes or no, and certainly to be able to give guidance with respect to what is the way forward. At the moment, you apply, and there's no timeline for anything. So an application, and just to respond to what the honourable member queried about, because you mentioned aspects of corruption and the like. The reality is that once an application is submitted to the central bank, there is an obligation to respond. And therefore, you don't use whatever systems he thinks exists where the file or the application may end up in a drawer, and there's no obligation to respond because of some nefarious activity that he believes may exist. So therefore, by stipulating a time frame, not that you want to take every day of the 3 months to respond, but the point is there is a time frame within which there must be a response to the applicant. And why is that important? Because as we look to open up and do business, we need to give greater certainty with respect to not just responses, but to keep everybody on track with respect to the decision-making process. And so the issue of the 3 months is not whether it's too short or not. The bank has an obligation to assess the information that has been submitted. Once all of the information has been submitted, which has been chronicled and assessed, then they will obviously meet with the various players, do their due diligence, and will be required to say yes or no within that 3 month period, and allow people to make a decision whether they will set up their entities or not. As you know, sir, the Central Bank and the Financial Services Commission, when we came to office, we determined that we needed to set up what is called a sandbox, so that before any technology is deployed any new technology is deployed within the context of Barbados' financial system, that our regulators understand the impact of it, that we understand how consumers would be protected, and therefore facilitate a better understanding from the regulator. And that model will continue to be engaged, sir, so that if there's anything that is new that's coming up that our regulators have not necessarily encountered, and we want to have a better understanding, then that framework is there, settled, where any new technology can be examined before it is unleashed onto unsuspecting public. And I think that it is within that set of rules that the national payments ecosystem will be rolled out. But the truth is, sir, I really am excited because, as I said, we are doing the other bill, sir, in relation to the digital ID. And to the extent, sir, that there are persons in this country today who don't have bank accounts, and it is their right not to have a bank account if they so desire. But equally, sir, within the context of the digital ID, there will be a functionality within the digital ID that contemplates, sir, the creation of what effectively would be a digitization of the currency. So the cash that you have in your pocket that you're keeping at home, sir, that you, for whatever reason, you don't wish to have a bank, credit union account, or anything, we will be capable, if you so desire, sir, of being able to have a form of a digital account that is not linked necessarily to a bank account, but it's the same way that you digitize, in a real sense, the cash that you have in your pocket. So that functionality is there. It's almost like an e-wallet, sir. So you got cash in your wallet. That wallet now becomes digital. That is contemplated under the new regulations. And therefore, inclusion is contemplated under that, which can be facilitated as part of the process. And why is this important? Because as government wants to equally, sir, as I said, dispense benefits to citizens, then it makes it easier for us to do that through that process or into your bank account or any other any other payment structure that you may wish to engage as a citizen. But the notion of an e-wallet, sir, is critically important so that persons can, the same way that you walk into, because to be honest, sir, obviously legal tender is legal tender. So stop. Barbados dollars will continue to be legal tender of the realm. And therefore, as we move forward and contemplate how we are going to address these issues going forward, even in a digitalized environment, that the notion on the use of the ID as a potential e-wallet is contemplated, and citizens will have options, sir. Citizens will have options. And therefore, whether it is your pension, sir, you will just simply, if you are a citizen, sir, still currently getting your NIS pension check delivered to you by the postman, the NIS could conceivably, sir, just for the benefit of those persons who still want to engage in that process, could send you a notice that your pension has been deposited into your potentially your digital form of your ID. You can still determine if you want to go down to the post office. The post office will have whatever facilities available, just like ATM, sir, that you will go, tap your card, put in whatever information you need to put in, and you will access your money. So if you still want to go to the post office or any other place for that matter, you can still do that. But all we are saying, sir, is that we are facilitating a different way of being able to do these things. But it is up to citizens, sir, for us to walk citizens through what these changes will be like. And the truth is, sir, the pensioners can still congregate well, obviously once COVID passes, they can still congregate at the post office if they want, but for a different reason. They can still congregate or go to some other place of the gathering on pension day, which I believe is much more better use of their time to be able to so do. So we are trying to respond in ways that does not disturb people socially, if you like, but it will require, obviously, engagement with respect to being able to do that. But these are the things, sir, that are contemplated. And therefore, the options and the options available to citizens, we are ensuring that these things are possible, number one, and that persons understand that you can do things differently, and still have the same impact. And so I am excited for a whole number of reasons, because this bill and the one that we're contemplating doing this afternoon, I fundamentally believe goes hand in hand with respect to not just a response to COVID, but it really is a transformational element in the way that we do things in the country. And it offers protection for all of the consumers, offers protection for vendors, offers protection for those in the ecosystem that operate, and allows for greater certainty with respect to a number of these matters. And so, sir, I understand that this is one step in a journey that would require all stakeholders, all participants to agree that rather than do this and leave this for 25 years, I'm stating is certainly the government's policy to have a clear review every 3 to 5 years of what is required to keep Barbados in the game. Because we should never resort to a state where 20, 25 years has passed and we have not made enough adjustments to keep ourselves relevant, not just to our citizens, but equally as we engage globally. And so it is certainly the government's intention to keep the change as constant as it needs to be for us to stay on top of the issues that are not just affecting the citizens in Barbados and the businesses in Barbados, but that we are repositioning Barbados, sir, repositioning Barbados to not just be the leading state in the Caribbean, but we have to aim to be the leading state in the hemisphere and be able to facilitate any business, whether small, whether large, whether domestic or foreign, that our business is global. And therefore, if we are going to stay true to that, then we have to be consistent with the transformation. We have to be consistent with the principles that we've set out, and that we bring along people on the journey that will not just deliver economic recovery, but that the economic growth will be sustained, and that in so doing, it means that whilst we are still a small, open, and vulnerable economy, that we would have built enough financial resilience within our processes, that we would build enough economic resilience by being able to effectively, sir, diversify the way that we do things in the country. So diversifying the economy means we have to look at the way that we engage not just locally, but externally. And therefore, when people talk about diversifying away from tourism and all these other nice things, this is part, sir, of the mechanism of that diversification. And therefore, I continue to urge Barbadians that this is not the end of the road. This is really just the beginning after a long hiatus, and therefore continue on the path of transformation. And if we commit to all doing that and be consistent with it, then I know that Barbados will not just recover, but we'll be able to achieve the objectives of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, COVID notwithstanding, and be able to give our citizens a better life, sir. With those few words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Clauses 1 to 3.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 1, Clause 1 to 3 stand part.
Question is that Part 1, Clause 1 to 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor? All those in nay?
Part 2, Clauses 4 to 7.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 2, Clauses 4 to 7 stand part.
Question is 2, Clauses 4 to 7 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please stand up. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, Clauses 8 to 17.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 3, Clauses 8 to 17 stand part.
Question is that Part 3, Clauses 8 to 17. All honorable members, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, Clauses 18 to 27.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 4, Clauses 18 to 27 stand part.
Question is that Part 4, Clauses 18 to 27 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, Clauses 28 to 31.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 5, Clauses 28 to 31 stand part.
Question is that Part 5, Clauses 8 to 21 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, Clauses 32 to 35.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 6, Clauses 32 to 35 stand part.
Question is that Part 6, Clauses 32 to 35 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, Clauses 36 to 38.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 7, Clauses 36 to 38 stand part.
Question is that Part 7, clauses 36 to 38 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, clauses 39 to 43.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 39 to 43 stand part.
Question is that Part 8, clauses 38 to 43 stand 39 to 43 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 9, clauses 44 to 49.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 9, clauses 44 to 49 stand part.
Question is that Part 9, clauses 44 to 49 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 10, clauses 50 and 51.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 10, clauses 50 to 51 stand part.
50 to 51 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 11, clauses 52 to 53.
Madam Chair, I want to amend clause 53(1)(c) to delete the words "in the banking system." So clause 53(1)(c) should read, "Clearing and settlement mechanisms shall facilitate rapid provision of final settlement after a payment instruction has been initiated, according to the time limits that the central bank may establish from time to time, and." So we're deleting the words "in the banking system." So, Madam Chair, with that, I beg to move that part.
Asking the member again. What was it?
Sorry?
Just repeat. Yeah.
53(1)(c).
What you deleted? What has been deleted?
The words "in the banking system." So, Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 11, clauses 52 to 53, stand part as amended.
Question is that Part 6, clauses 52
No,
Part 11.
Part 11, clauses 52 and 53 with amendment stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 12, clauses 54 to 57.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 12, clauses 54 to 57, stand part.
Question is that Part 12, clauses 54 to 57 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 13, clauses 58 to 63. 3.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Part 13, clauses 58 to 63, stand part.
Question is that Part 13, clauses 58 to 63 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The schedule.
Madam Chair, I wish to have an amendment to the schedule. You will notice that 1(1)(g), there is actually the number 1 as opposed to the word 1 O-N-E. So I want to replace the numeral with the word 1 in clause 1(g) of the schedule. And so with that, Madam Chair, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill as amended.
Question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill as amended. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. As amended. As amended.
Question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill as amended in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committee has reported one bill as amended passed in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the National Payment Systems Act 2021.
The question that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 4, sir. In the name of the Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the second reading of the Bills of Exchange Amendment Bill 2021.
Honorable member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Speaker, as this bill was done in cognate, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
Question is that clause 1 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
Question is that clause 2 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do no report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Bills of Exchange Amendment Act 2021.
Question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:15 p.m.
Question that this chamber be suspended until 2:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 2:15 p.m.